Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 26th episode of Socratic Satsang. Coming to you from Vancouver this time with a question: what is good health? We know that the absence of illness doesn't mean good health. So, what is truly good health? Let's discuss and find out. Our first speaker for today, Paulina. Over to you, Paulina.
Thank you, Vin. So, before I start diving into what health is, I just want to introduce one concept, and is what a system is. Because without the understanding what a system is, health cannot be put into an understanding. So, a system is basically a collection of parts that work together, and then they create a function or a product, and they always work together, and then they depend on each other, the parts. So I say when a system is in balance and no part is doing more or less than the others, things are balanced and in good health. So systems exist in nature, and systems exist everywhere we look. So the first big system is the universe. The universe is one of the biggest systems, and it's got all its parts working. So there's, some of the elements are matter, antimatter. You got planets, you got galaxies, you have, gravity forces. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that, but uh, you can see that the concept of health is not unique to us humans, as we usually tend to look at us as the center of everything. So then you get other systems like planets, and each planet has its own system and its own health, its own climates, whatever. We happen to live in one of the most wonderful ones that we are aware of. Of course, there may be millions more that like us. So in our planet, we have ecosystems that are also functioning together, parts that are healthy or unhealthy. And when all the parts are working together and in balance, you could say that they are following a plan of health. Then we have animals, and I'm not going to talk about any other animal but humans in this case. So with humans, we have, again, we are a system, and then we have many different ways in which we could define health. So we look at aspects like the physical health, we look at aspects like the mental health, we look at aspects like emotional health, interpersonal health, how we relate to others, and society. So within humans, we also have other systems like culture, governments. We have at this moment things that are like in the US, we see that big system with political system that is not healthy because it's starting to get imbalance. When systems of that nature have too many forces or not equality pulling one way or the other, or they're breaking down all these things that they have created to guard that system, then is falling. So I'd like to dive more into what human health is at a later time, but I just wanted to, first of all, establish that health in all of us systems, is basically the ability and the way to make the system is all, fall into balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Yes, Tulip, over to you.
So, health to me is basically your overall being, your overall coming together, how you put yourself together, bringing yourself in harmony with your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, financial, social health. So it's just not one aspect. It's not like, someone would say that, okay, this is how much they have let's say, made and they have X amount of money in the bank, and now no one can touch the person. It's not like that. Then the same person will be popping pills, and is unhealthy in the physical aspect, or might have other challenges. So, and unfortunately, I've seen that a lot um, of focus is on making ends meet. So then, like they're working towards that, and they're forgetting, um, you know, they're forgetting how to live healthy. And I feel like the number one thing in life is your health, of course, emotional and spiritual as well. But to begin with, you got to take care of your diet. I think that's super important. It starts from there. And like there have been, you know, I've had some, there was this one particular lady I remember when she was very well off, and she's like, oh, there's no hurry. I will lose some weight, and, I will take care of my health. I'm still young. No, there is, you got to be like, you got to hurry up, because every day you're getting older. And if you think that, making a particular lifestyle, like the money part is important, then I think that's wrong, because um, I think by the time you reach a certain age, you can't even enjoy what you have. And so, and then the person says that, well, I go to the temple regularly, and I think that's not being spiritual, because I think the moment you take, like, when you're spiritual, by default you're healthy, and being healthy is being spiritual. Um, then there's another point, um, is like your genetics are your karma, and what you do with it, that's important again. And you got to give your best, your 100%. And then beyond that, things happen. It is what it is. um yeah, and I think taking care of your health is a constant struggle, be it in any aspect, whether you're, like I said, like the physical, mental, emotional. You got to keep at it. You got to keep building your muscles, and being, tenacious, and being on top of your game. It's like, working out. You work out to build muscles. You're healthy, and yeah, you got to keep doing that. And yeah, that's pretty much.
Thank you, Tulip. That was wonderful. Who'd like to go? Drake, over to you, Drake.
Hi, I think what Tulip was saying there about health and having to take care of yourself is very important physically. Um, as all of us age, more and more issues creep up, and the sooner we take care of our bodies and what we're putting into ourselves, and that, the better for our longer term health. Um, Putting on extra weight, like some of us have done over the years, uh, adds to a lot of issues later on. So we've got to work to try and keep that down, keep our proper eating, and physically active, so that we stay healthy physically. But another very important part of it is our mental health. And that's one of those things that people tend to overlook. People think that I'm okay, I can deal with anything, I don't need any other help for that, or I don't want other people to know about my personal mental struggles, whatever they may or may not be. But most people go through life and have these different struggles, and mentally, it affects them physically. It manifests itself in other sort of illnesses, and uh, it could be something as simple as just I feel bad mental health wise, so I'm going to eat more ice cream, my favorite food, whatever it is, right? And end up affecting yourself there, because you're putting on weight. So mental health is a big part of it, and um, nobody, most people don't like admitting to when they've had issues. And I've had issues in the past related to my military service and things I've seen and done. And it took a while for me to recognize that and to recognize what was going on and how it had started to influence the way I reacted, how I felt. And um, fortunately, I was able to talk to some people through the military and get the help that I needed to sort things out. And I certainly wasn't an extreme case, but it was one of those things that it really pays off to look at your own issues mentally as well as physically and take care of yourself holistically and not just concentrate on one thing. Yeah, I want to work out and that'll be good. Right. That's a great part of it. It helps your mental health out. But if you're ignoring any of the different phases of your health, it's detrimental to you in the long run and will continue to cause you problems. All right, I'll let someone else speak for a while now.
Thank you, Drake. Denise.
Oh, this subject. It's just, I can resonate with everything that Paulina, Tulip, and Drake have just said. I think I've spoken about a few health issues on past podcasts that we've done. So I'm not going to rehash my whole history or my family's history right now. But suffice it to say, when you, like, 2 years ago, 2 years ago next week, I got very, very sick. And one day I could see, and the next day I couldn't. Now I've got my eyesight back, but it changes everything and it changes your perspective. It took away my independence. And it was quite frankly my own fault in a way that I wasn't keeping up with blood work and things like that. That would have been really helpful had I actually done all of that. And so it changes your perspective when something happens. If I had a wish for people, it would be not to wait until something happens to realize how important our health is. And, we talked about physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and how, to me, all of those things are connected. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of information out there from, for example, Louise Hay, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's a Vancouverite, that talk about when we go into mental health and physical, sorry, I guess mental and physical, that there's reasons why some of that occurs, and it can be based on how we are dealing with things emotionally or mentally as to why we might have a physical issue. So I find that quite interesting. That's one piece. The other piece I find interesting too when it comes to health, and this is something that I practice, is sound and sound healing. We always hear that saying, what is it? Good mind, body, soul connection. But when it comes, of sound mind and body, and quite frankly, our organs, our tissues, our muscles, everything is vibrating at a certain frequency. So when we get sick or stressed out or we become ill, there's a counter frequency that encodes over the healthy one. And so sound has been proven, or frequency has been proven, to help kind of right us, so to speak. So I find that there's a number of different ways that we can help ourselves stay in good health, whatever that actually looks like. But again, reaching that balance point, being able to find that harmony. And I'm also in the financial industry and have been for, 30, I'm in my 36th year. And we talk about health now in all different industries. So when I talk to clients, it's always about, like Tulip had mentioned, financial health, right? So health tends to enter into almost every facet of our lives. And so hopefully we realize how important that is in all facets of our lives, not just the physical health, but quite frankly, just circling back to my first example of losing my eyesight. When you don't have your physical health, and I hear people say it all the time, I'm going to wait. I think it was Tulip had said, people put things on hold. If you're not healthy physically, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have shelter, food, and feel safe, how do you progress forward? But man, if you don't have your physical health, nothing else matters, in my opinion. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Denise. Yes, Joe. And after Joe, we can come to Kevin.
Okay. Well, I'll build on everything people, and certainly from my own experience, mostly of people I've been caregiver for, I understand that foundational aspect of physical health. Like when that really goes sideways, boy, it's hard to get beyond it and consider anything else. And I guess ultimately, if your physical system fails, well, then it's all over. But picking up on Paulina's point about systems and all the components working together, a couple of things. Seeing, I guess it's part of my job to find obscure quotes. So I found that the World Health Organization, WHO, in 1948, offered up a definition of health. And it's not bad. And actually for 1948, it's particularly not bad. But basically it says, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, which is, and there's been, of course, a lot of debate since then on how much more broad it could be. But the basic premise being it's a number of things. And I zeroed in on the term well-being thing. So it's like a state of well-being. And I said, well, if we're being like an analytic philosopher, we would say, well, well-being is an interesting phrase. It's not merely being well. It is actually sort of bringing wellness into being. So it's a very interesting challenge. And I'm going to just zero in on that further and say, and hearkening back to Paulina's point about systems and all its interacting and interdependent components, that if well-being is sort of being able to sort of do what what the system is supposed to do, then it assumes, or it commands or demands ability to change, because of course the environment around you changes. And even the function or purpose will adapt. So it can't be static. So that'd be one thing I would sort of quibble with the WHO definition, is that state sounds kind of static. It's like a fixed balance. I said, well, it can't really, humans aren't like that. So I think we might have been waiting for the same ferry, Vin. Today, I race up. Today, I spent a day. I got up, 5 a.m. I mean, I have been racing around like a lunatic all day long, mostly shuttling my parents here, my youngest daughter out to the ferry, and so on and so forth. So by the time I got back here, I was run pretty ragged. So in some ways, my physical system was running on fumes. But in other ways, I felt I had fulfilled my function as sort of provider and assistant to other people. And even part of my morning was with, dealing with some of my customers. So, and in all cases, feeling like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. So when we're thinking about balance sometimes, and in this particular, and I'll wrap up with this, that perhaps in a temporary basis, in order to change, you have to juggle it a bit. So for me to do all the things I'm supposed to do socially and emotionally as my commitments, I had to sort of sacrifice a bit of my physical well-being today and surviving on suboptimal food and usually, just hurried consumption of whatever was nearby so that I could get these other things done. So, but obviously you can't stay that, but you can't stay in that state of imbalance. But also you cannot change without going through an imbalance. So I'll stop there.
So we are brought into this existence as a living system equipped to deal with the environment. And when you're talking about all the adaptations that you have to do, that is part of the health of your system, as you mentioned. That is the healthy thing. So I'm going to argue a little bit with the definition of what health is, because I like to see it like a Russian doll, right? And so it's a system within a system within a system. So the biggest part of the Russian doll would be the universe. And the health of the universe is all these things that collide with each other, destroy each other. You could call chaos and order. And then you go to each planet that also has its own things that happen, destroy. But that's part of the natural form, and it goes with it. And ecosystems have the same problem. Sometimes you have an invading species that wreaks havoc, and all of a sudden the ecosystem doesn't work. It's not healthy, but it also prompts new changes that will eventually create that balance and that health. So the challenges are part of the process, so to speak. And so going to humans, we belong to the system of nature. And the system of nature is designed for everything to be existing and then ceasing to exist. If the leaves would not decompose in the autumn, we wouldn't have rich soil for the new trees. They cease to exist because they are exposed to something. So we are meant to break down at one point. And so, on the one hand, I find the balance that we so eagerly try to keep is I'm going to say it's a nice objective. We are super aware of what that balance needs to be, and we can do things to continue that balance. But at the same time, if we are part of that system of nature, it is healthy for us to also go. And it's part of, I would say, the universe plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Over to you, Kevin, my brother.
All right. Thank you very much. I apologize to everyone here that I'm late, but, we're talking about, the mind and the body, or mensana and corporsana. My wife, two mornings ago, was getting ready to go out for tea with a friend of hers next. And as she was bending down to pick something up, she stood up and her back went out. This has never happened to her before. So since then, my days have been filled with being like a full-time butler and housekeeper, as well as a cook. And the time got away from me. So yes, I agree. A healthy back is important. And but I also want to bring to bear that the mind and the body are interconnected. And like the Latin saying of a healthy mind and a healthy body. I remember a time and work in Ottawa where I was I was being bullied by my immediate manager through jealousy of my ability to relate to my coworkers and get things done versus his management style. And when we were taking turns as acting managers, and so when it was his turn, he wanted to make sure that I did not get the manager position, which I wasn't interested in at all. But anyway, how it manifested itself was all this stress and all this public shaming was happening. My back would give out. And I never had back trouble before. I was fairly healthy because I was working out twice a week in the gym. Plus, I was playing basketball for a few hours, and I was cycling to and from work on my bike, and that was a good 30, 40 minute drive. So the body was fine, but under attack and under the stress, it manifested itself in a sore back. And when I transferred out of that section, magically my back problems went away without any need for therapy or a chiropractor. It was just so the mind and the body have to be in sync, and you got to be in a healthy place. And if you're that way, then you have wealth in my world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I can go next. I agree with everything that's been said so far. 100% think health is holistic. We've got to take the bird's eye view rather than just look at one aspect. Someone said that when you are alive and well, you have 99 problems. But when you have a health problem, you have just one problem. And that's your health. So we've got to look out for that. I like to look at health as 8 tentacles. And those 8 tentacles would include physical health. That's your physical state, your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, ability to move, ability to recover. I won't go into each one because everyone's covered it already. The second would be mental health. Third would be emotional health. Fourth would be spiritual health. And then you'd have family and community health. What's the state of your relationships? How are the people who are closest to you interacting with you? That does have an effect on you. Then we have environmental health. That is, are you living in a hygienic area? Or are you living in an area that's got germs all around? What if you're in a war-torn area? So the environment, or just surrounded by toxic people. So the environment, and I think Kevin made this point best. A toxic person, nothing to do with Kevin, but it affected his health. And then you have financial health. That's just a reality we all have to face in the world we live in. And the eighth tentacle is genetic and epigenetic health. No matter what you do, you might just inherit something through genetics or even epigenetics. Drake today sent me a forward, which I'd already seen, but it just came as such a strong reminder that sometimes people are traumatized and have things that they react to without knowing why. And it's probably just been passed on from their parents' trauma or something else that someone in their ancestry has gone through. And you may not have the memory of what caused it, but you still have the reactions to it. There was this experiment done where rats were put in a cage and a certain um, music was played. And just after the music was played, the floor would be electrified and they would all get shocks. So this was done for a little while. And then the electric shock stopped, but the music would be played on and off. And every time the music was played, the rats would still react as if they're going through those electric shocks. And the first generation of rats died out. The second one continued to have that trauma every time music was played, even though none of them had experienced the shocks themselves. And apparently this carried on for 3 generations before it could be handled. So epigenetics and genetics also plays a role. It's important for all of us to develop the right habits. You can monitor your health and stay in charge essentially with good habits. And otherwise, there's 2 other ways of looking at it. One is reactively looking at your health, as in someone says, don't eat sugar, and you can't help yourself. And one day the doctor looks at your test results and says, okay, now you're in trouble. And that's the day you get traumatized and you react and you say, okay, no more sugar. Or you can do what very few people do, but much more effective, is be proactive. Before something happens, think 5 steps ahead and get ahead of the problem before it can come. Change your habits, change your lifestyle, change your thoughts, your words, your actions, and point things in a healthy manner. Healthy financially, healthy environmentally, and all the 8 tentacles that I spoke about. Thank you. Over to you, Tulip.
Yeah, about the sugar part, that was beautiful, by the way. I would like to add that almost everyone in the world is addicted to sugar. I call it like an unknown addiction because, you know, whether it's hidden in some form or the other, it's everywhere. And I feel the good things, like, it's like the right person or the savior is always demonized, like the fats in the diet is demonized, whereas sugar is like, okay, go ahead and have your cereals with topped with sugar. There's so much information out there, so it can be overwhelming. People are like, okay, there's a lot of information, but it's nice to have it. I think it's good, but then we should listen to our own body, and see what works for us, because each one is different, our paths are different, so we got to make sense of what works for us. And something very funny, this has happened a few times, or when people are sitting and there's someone stuffing their face and they'll ask me, what do you do? Like, we ask each other, like, what do you do to take care of your health? And then, when I say I don't have this or that, they're like, but I can never give up what XYZ. You know what? If you can never, then trauma will make sure, like what Vince said, it will happen. So stop being lazy and go and do the work. And of course, there are times it's beyond us. So that's something we got to live with. But then why make it worse? And then there's always this, oh, let me start, I'll start on the first Monday, or this is the last day of the month. You know what? It's nothing is vanishing into thin air. It's like getting inside your system. So, like, start right now. And yeah, that's pretty much.
Thank you, Tulip. Over to you, Denise.
So that is a subject that is very near and dear to me, is the whole sugar thing. I used to use sugar as a reward. I had a long day at work. It was a bit difficult, challenging clients, and to reward myself, with something sugary because it made me feel better. It's amazing. When I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and that's how I found out. I found out through losing my vision. As I mentioned, it was there one day and gone the next. And we have the ability to make choices about anything, typically. And when it comes to there's so many influences. All it takes is one, 10 minutes through social media, and you can find all kinds of like desserts and donuts and the things they have in the States. Sorry, I'm not picking on the US, but some of the food is just ridiculous. Like, you get a milkshake, but in that milkshake, there's a cupcake, and then there's a cookie on top, and then icing, and then something else. And sugar has become an addiction, no question. And I was one of those people. Now, I didn't eat the milkshake, but the cupcake and the cookie and all that stuff all at once. But I was, what I would say, definitely addicted to it. When I lost my vision, literally my whole world changed. And it changed to the point where I did a complete 180. Like, in other words, it was like, okay, I value my vision. Much like Drake, I love photography, and I also paint, and I do a whole bunch of things that require my vision. And my grandmother, she lost her vision about 5 years before she passed away to glaucoma. And I saw what that can do to someone. We're just here as ourselves once. And so, anyway, the sugar really hit home for me because people say, oh, I don't have a choice, or they use it as a reward. And we have to really start thinking about, because I have so many examples in my life of people who made some bad choices and have had to live with that, and how adversely it's affected their lives. Now, at the same time, when I think of my father, who is a double amputee, he's my stepdad, so we're not technically biologically related. And he's been my dad since I was 3. So he's my dad, no question. However, we don't share the same biological makeup or genetics. And he lost both of his legs to diabetes. He has every disease you could possibly think of that's related to diabetes. However, he goes out every day in his electric wheelchair and hangs out with his friends at used to be Starbucks, now it's Tim Hortons, and he gets that socialization. He went into palliative care in August this year. I swear they're going to come back and say, you know what? You're out of palliative care, buddy. As in, like, he is just still going. And even though his physical health has significantly failed, he still has his mental abilities and he still has the socialization to create those emotional bonds. And that to me is resilience. And I think we all have it inside of ourselves to do that.
Thank you, Denise. That was wonderful. Over to you, Paulina.
Yeah, I think I'd like to dive a little bit into a slightly different aspect of health. So, as some of you know, I did biofeedback for many years. Biofeedback is basically technology to help people cope with stress. But in biofeedback, we define health in slightly different terms because life, like biological life, is always faced with stress. So Salier, a scientist, came up with this bar of what stress is and actually how to define health. So the first part of this bar is alarm, and I'm just going to make an analogy. So alarm is our bodies letting us know that we are in danger. So let's say I start smoking, and so I cough, I want to puke, the smell, I don't like it. So my body is rejecting it through all of these things. Or I get a virus. So I get a fever, I get really tired, I get all of those symptoms. And so that's my body basically telling me that there's an invader. Or let's just say in an emotional way, somebody is screaming at me or insulting me. So I don't know what to do. So I start running away or I go to police and I start making a big deal about it. So all these actions that your body and your mind and your emotional being takes to defend themselves, it's actually a part of a normal reaction. The fever helps your temperature raise so that pathogens don't come onto you. Sometimes we see that as a disease, but that's actually the healthy part of you. So you don't have energy. You have to keep that energy so that you can fight those viruses, those pathogens, right? You have to cough it out because the smell and the toxins of the cigarette are really bad. So what happens in this bar is that we move into a phase that is called adaptation. So if you have alarm, then you have adaptation next. So with adaptation, that means your resources are getting spent too much. If you continue to smoke for more than 2 weeks, you will stop coughing and you will stop disliking it, which basically means your body saying, I can't keep on fighting. I can't keep on sending resources because it's too costly for me. It's costing me on minerals and all these things that your body makes. So then you adapt to it because that is the healthier way of making you survive, right? If you're in an abusive relationship where somebody's screaming, but you've been to the police so many times and you basically don't get help, you actually adapt to it. You make it in your head so that you can survive the trauma. You make it look like it's normal, right? And sometimes we take a Tylenol or we take some kind of a medicine that suppresses our fever, suppresses our symptoms. So your body actually jumps into adaptation. But that can happen other ways. You know, if you've been fighting something for a long time, your body actually moves into a place where it no longer reacts because it can't spend the resources, right? So the last phase is exhaustion. So how does that look? Exhaustion, if you are with the smoking, you are going to end up with a lung cancer. If you are with an abusive relationship, you may have a mental breakdown, or you may be actually killed. You know, it's the extreme part when things didn't actually take form. So with a virus or a pathogen that's been working its way underneath your body without much reaction, you end up with a diagnosis. Now you have cancer. Now you have all these other things that now are resurfacing in a way that you're no longer able to cope. So under this bar of measurement of what health is, it's said that the best place to be is between alarm and adaptation. Why? Because alarm is basically your body giving you all this advice, or all these, your body, your mind, your circumstances are being highlighted as you need to defend yourself. But you also need to learn to adapt to things so that your resources are not spent, too much. So that's just another way of defining health. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Over to you, Joe.
Just pick up on a couple things here, some really interesting threads to weave together. But think of Denise's dad, actually, and the example of almost like a dedication to something, almost like a purpose. But it could be socializing, it could be the community, it could be an art, like a reason to propel forward and find balance. And that seems to currently come back as a consideration that if health is balance, but it comes back to, well, as a system, back to function, like to do what. And not far from where I'm sitting right now, there's the statue of Terry Fox right near Mile Zero on the Trans-Canada Pipeline, or pipeline highway. And one of the quotes, although it's not one of the quotes that's at that monument, it's the quote of his that is stunningly powerful, where he literally said, "Cancer made me a better person." And it's like, what? What on earth? But he said, he was, living life as a college frat boy, basically, and said, but it was the challenge to his health, his physical health, that then challenged him to become so much more. So ultimately, the cancer won, but it was that transcendence, that pushing beyond. And I remember back, every once in a while, I think one of our get-togethers a couple of months ago, I quoted a poet from the early 18th century, Alexander Pope, who, as poets go, is stunningly powerful and effective and precise in a way that people just don't write nowadays. But in the early 18th century, he was relatively young and was afflicted with spinal tuberculosis, which is not good. So he's basically lived his entire life in incredible pain. It was like, but he found through his art, his craft, and became very wealthy as a result, and obviously highly esteemed, somehow, achieved a whole lot more. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Joe. Drake, over to you.
Yeah, just in response to what Joe was saying there about Terry Fox and what he went through, talking about how it made him a better person, reminded me of Nietzsche and his philosophy on this, where he thought that it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a dynamic state of great health he looked at. But he talked about for a healthy individual, there's someone who can confront challenges and confront suffering and find meaning in the struggle and affirming their life. And I thought that sounds very much like what Terry Fox did, despite everything else going wrong with him cancer-wise and his body failing on him. To have that attitude, he's overcoming those challenges in the only way he can, and being very positive about it. Nietzsche talked about willpower and strength, and how health is directly related to that strength and meeting those challenges and demands. And so I thought it was just a very fitting connection there that he brought up Terry Fox and his struggles. And um, I just wanted to add that to it.
Thank you, Drake. Yes, Kevin, thank you.
And getting back to diabetes, and I just want to tell you about sort of my journey with the type 2 diabetes that information or the diagnosis I got in 2014. And I remember at that time I was absolutely horrified and so disappointed in myself that I went completely hardcore and read everything I could and watched a lot of internet stuff on how to uh, cut sugar out of my system as much as I could. And for the 2 months before, there was a mandatory course that I had to go on and was put on by the province of Ontario. And they said, you're going to see a nurse and a dietitian. And I was in a classroom with all these other people. But for those 2 months when I went hardcore, completely miserable, hated my life, hated everything. Go to the course. And they said, all right, Kevin, first of all, because of the family history, you were going to get on that diabetes train. And yeah, you might have worked out a little bit harder, and might have delayed it another few months, or you could have let yourself go and got on that train sooner. But irregardless, you're going to get on that train. So welcome to the human race. You're just normal, and accept it. And let's work on getting your diet under control. And one thing I found out was that in the office that I was working at, in the basement was a cafeteria run by this lovely Indian couple. And every Wednesday was butter chicken day. And I would notice that every time I had my Wednesday lunch, which everyone in the building seemed to look forward to, my blood sugar system would just go through the roof. And so I cut that out. And the nurse had a talk with me, as well as the dietitian, one-on-one. And we went through that and said, Kevin, when you have butter chicken, how do you feel? I feel fantastic, but, I know it's bad for me. And every time I, test myself after that, it goes through the roof. Well, Kevin, if you know that's going to happen, stop testing yourself after that. All right. And instead of having it every week, try it once a month, and then try it once every 2 months, once every 3 months. And that seemed to have worked. Now, I've got my diet under controls, and ever since then, I was diagnosed with that Waldenstrom's thing, which I don't want to talk about right now. But health-wise, and going through right now, not being so miserable and still having the occasional butter chicken, maybe once every 4 months, life is good. And I'm enjoying life again. So it's all right to be human. Recognize it. Know that when you fall off the wagon, as I did when I have the butter chicken, the next morning, it's back to the gym, back to no rice, quinoa, and whatever. Just go back. But still, trying to enjoy life, even though you're under restrictions. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, Denise, followed by Paulina, please.
So, Kevin, obviously, I can completely and utterly relate to your story and what you're saying. It wasn't butter chicken for me. It was Siegel's Bagels on Granville Island. And so what I do when I get my A1C tested that day, because that day doesn't really count for the next A1C, I always go to Granville Island and get myself a Siegel's Bagel. Just one. But, there's got to be some happiness in there. The diabetes thing really took me hard because of my vision. But it was the same thing when I had Crohn's disease. I had surgery for it 25 years ago. I was told I was going to die in 2 weeks if they didn't do the surgery. I was 112 pounds when I went into surgery. The disease went through me like crazy, and the pain was absolutely horrific. Did the surgery, naturally, and the surgeon came in afterwards to tell me how things went. And obviously things went okay. I was alive and things went all right. But the interesting thing is he basically said to me, so just so you know, you'll be on medication now for the rest of your life. You'll probably be back here in 5 years. And he gave me kind of like the Reader's Digest of kind of the statistical side of things. And I just basically said, no, I think I'm good. And I made some fairly significant changes in my world temporarily anyway. And still no medication, nothing, in my head. So in my actual, being, I don't have Crohn's disease anymore. And I'm knocking on wood as I say this, of course, but I've never had an incident in 25 years. So I had the surgery, and some people might say is denial. That's fine. And it's the same thing with the diabetes diagnosis, right? So I did a complete 180, pulled my A1C down by half. It was 13 when I was diagnosed and lost my vision. And I had been sick for probably a good 10 to 15 years without knowing it. Never did any blood work. I felt fine, right? Why would I go into blood work if I felt fine? And now I have a spreadsheet of my blood work. It's kind of fun. But it was the same thing where I was told, you're going to be on this medication, that medication. And I changed my diet, changed exercise, slept better, stress under control, all that stuff, and made a huge difference. So I'm not suggesting that people ignore the advice of a doctor, not at all. However, I do feel that we have the capacity to make changes in our lives, still enjoy our lives, whether it's butter chicken or a bagel, but also to be able to change part of who we are.
I feel that balance is at the most important aspect of any health, any advice, like even Chinese medicine. It's the balance between yin and yang and the 5 elements. And what they mean by that is that, if you over-exercise to be healthy, well, you're not going to be healthy. You're going to destroy your body because you're going to have a lot of lactic acid and you're going to overdo your joints. You're going to do a bunch of things that are not actually healthy. Even though what your intention is to be healthy, you're actually not going to be healthy. Now, if you are basically getting too much emphasis in your finances, you're going to overwork yourself and you're going to be maybe having a lot of income, but you're not going to be happy and functioning well because all your mental, all your energy is put into one aspect. So that is not contributing to anything that is balanced. So going back to when people have diabetes, and I'm going to say this, I had a lot of people that used to come because Biofifa is really good for helping people quit smoking, right? So I had people that used to come and say, well, I'm going to go cold turkey or whatever. And I would say, actually, don't. If you are the kind of person who can do it slowly, do it. Because the misery that you're going to put yourself through it is not, you may be improving a little bit in one aspect, but you're actually getting yourself so miserable in another. So the thing is to keep a nice flow and balance. Everything in nature is like that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Yes, Denise.
So I just wanted to say to Paulina, just based on that, I actually, and I know Kevin mentioned this too, when I made some big changes in my life, I mean, I make raw carrot cake balls with cashew icing and all kinds of weird stuff now that I like. And my friends are looking at me like, what is that? But it works for me. I actually never went through that phase of great, now I can't eat this and I can't eat that, because all that mattered to me was being healthy. Now, the sight was one thing, but once I got my sight back, It wasn't like, oh, I got my sight back now, it's no big deal anymore. I changed my whole life, but I never regretted one moment of that change. I was happy. Well, I wasn't happy initially, but it wasn't because of what I had to change. It was much like what Kevin said, where you just feel like, what did I do to myself? Right? Like, what you feel slightly ashamed in a way, because it's like, I should know better. I should have gone for that blood work. I should have. And once I got over that, honestly, I've never ever felt like I was making myself miserable, because every time that something, a donut would pass in front of me, I literally just thought, I want to live a nice, long, healthy life, not just for me, but also for my daughter. My daughter needs me. She's autistic. She's 29.
What I was trying to say is moderation is definitely key. I myself have really serious health challenges, and I have to do some serious things that most people wouldn't even believe if I was to actually ever describe what I have to go through. Having said so, part of moderation and balance is that once in a while, I allow myself to be happy with the little things that maybe in the bigger picture are really harmful for me, but that just that one time that makes me happy, it's contributing to my emotional health, because health is not just my body. Health is my spirit. Health is, my mental being. Like, I was just thinking, even things like, a marriage, let's say, when you have one person that overdoes something and is breaking the balance, that's not a healthy marriage. So within a marriage, you have to have that balance, and sometimes you have to give in so that the other person is a little happy, even if it's not something that is whatever perfect, right? Anyway, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Tulip, over to you.
No, I completely agree. Obviously, it's your mental, emotional health that's very important. But I feel like I stress a lot upon the physical, like your diet and your exercise. And exercise does not mean going every day and like lifting heavy weights. It depends on what your body needs. And yeah, so yeah, I'm again laying emphasis on the diet and exercise and the physical health, because I feel if you feel good from within, like if you know that you don't have that excess fat in your body, and if you feel and healthy and light, oh my god, emotionally and mentally you'll already start feeling better. So that's very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Tulip. Over to you, Denise. We had lost you in between.
Actually, just backing onto Tulip, and I guess finishing off what I was saying, is that that's exactly what happened to me. I took care of my physical health, and it in turn took care of my mental health, my emotional health, and the spiritual health, I feel, has always been there for me, but certainly it was a very trying time. But I never once felt like I was missing something, or I wasn't like I was giving something up. I really, really felt connected to myself by saying, you know what, I'm going to take the best care of myself possible. And it is unbelievable what happens as a result of that. Like, everything else just clicked into place. And as far as my daughter is concerned, my daughter Antonia, she has fairly moderate to severe autism. She understands everything, but she has a hard time getting her words out. Physically, she's fit as a fiddle. So when I've injured myself in the past and she's helping mom and dragging me up a flight of stairs, she's really strong. She's super healthy. But the I still see her as healthy. She's interested in things. She might not be in the same space as the typical human being who has all their mental faculty and so forth, but it doesn't discount the fact that she is healthy in so many ways. So anyway, I'm glad I didn't get cut off by saying that. So
Yes, Drake.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit, I think beyond our mental and physical health, um, we have to remember that there's a lot of factors outside of us that affect those things. It could be our environment, whether it be the physical environment we're in nature, or the environment at work, or even just our general social environment. And some of those things we can control, others we can't. But I think anything we can do that's positive, whether it's stepping away from situations, or um, moving somewhere else, going out different places in nature, or even contributing to things that you know are going to be positive for the environment. Um, that mentally will help you, knowing that you're doing something that is a positive change, even if it's a small thing. So um, we got to remember those outside factors that affect us. We can do a little bit to influence them, and by doing that, it can bring us some relief and hopefully contribute to a better positive health for us. That's all I had there.
Thank you, Drake.
Just a quote from the esteemed Plato, and sort of it feels almost contrarian, but we'll give it a whirl and see what we can do with it. But attention to health is life's greatest hindrance. And of course, I immediately thought of the Russian dolls that Paulina brought up, saying, and then to get very, very obscure, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and the idea that a system, any one of those Russian dolls, cannot be defined internally. It has to be defined by a context, a larger context. What's the next level up of a Russian doll? So what is the purpose? What is the system striving to do? Which sounds very Aristotelian. So I guess my closing thought is, that perhaps Plato's slightly contrarian statement really says that if we were to over-focus on health, then we may actually lose the reason for the health.
Thank you, Joe. That was deep. Thank you so much, everybody. Looks like we've come to the end of this episode. This was a wonderful discussion and quite some deep and valuable insights. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you again next time.